University of Rock, and you're all officially enrolled, so congratulations. And tonight we have a really exciting program. This event is co-sponsored by the Milwaukee-based firm of Reber, Affinity, and St. John, so I want to thank them for their support. It's also co-sponsored by Peck School of the Arts at UWM, and in a moment we're going to be hearing from Scott Evans, who's the dean. So just to give you a little bit of an introduction, tonight's kickoff is Jews and Blues, and we're so thrilled to have with us Jim Liban, Peter Baller, and Mark Robinson, aka Lil Rev. And the connection to the Peck School being that Lil Rev was a former lecturer in the music department at the Peck School, so he's well versed, as are all three, in education and music. And tonight they're going to be kind of giving us a mix of both. And Rev wanted me to let everyone know that this is going to be about an 80-minute set, give or take, continuous, interspersed with talk. So if you, of course, need to get up and you feel free, but that's the plan for the evening. We have lots of things for sale. We have some additional artifacts that have been brought by our performers. And they have a wonderful synergy. They perform in similar circles around Milwaukee, and some of you may have had the opportunity to hear them, and you know it's going to be a really fun, jamming, exciting evening. So I wanted to welcome you all on behalf of the Jewish Museum in Milwaukee, and just for another little added information bit, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Evans, the Dean of the Peck School of the Arts.
Well, thank you. The conversations for Jews Who Rock started quite a long time ago, I guess probably about a year ago, and they started out with Ellen Freeber-Chupper and Molly, and someone who we missed a whole lot, and that's Dr. Martin Jack Rosenthal. And I hear and see, yeah. Martin Jack left a huge legacy to this Milwaukee community. We'll never forget his memorial where we saw bikers, poets, and musicians all together. I remember one person walking in the back of our big concert hall and said, "Is this kind of like a wedding? Do we have the biker side over here and the poet side over here?" It was Martin Jack's legacies are multivariate. And one of the legacies he left at UWM was the Rock and Roll Certificate Program. And this certificate program is going. It had obviously a little hitch. It turned out that Martin Jack filled the roles of many, many different people, and it's taken time to fill all those roles that one man used to fill. But now with many, many people, the certificate program will go on. One of the neat features about the certificate program is that there are many courses that are available to audience. So these can be courses that you might really enjoy, including American folk and popular music, American popular music, and the literature of rock and roll. So keep an eye out for those. I'll talk more about those on July 29th when I do my segment. As this goes on this summer, next week we have Bob Reitman, who will be talking about, I wonder who, maybe this Zimmerman guy from Minnesota. And then on July 29th, I'll be joined by Jody Brzezinski, and we'll be starting off with the music of Neil Diamond, and progressing, well, to now, we'll be having a little Maroon 5 and Pink, and that'll be a mix of live performance and also like tonight conversation as well. So, right now, it's my pleasure to introduce Lil Rev, Peter, and Jim.
Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys, and I want to thank you all for coming on a potentially rainy evening. Good to be back here once again. I want to start out again and give you just, a little bit of background history and what this night is about, what it means to the three of us. To do that, I want to tell you a little bit about a time period in America where blacks and Jews found each other. It is a fascinating time, and we're going to try to stand at that crossroads tonight and look at that time when blacks and Jews found each other. It's as much about the reciprocity of influence that human beings have on one another as it is about the music itself. After all, Harry Belafonte, when we were calling the highlights of his career, told us that one of them was singing Baba Nagila to 10,000 screaming Japanese. Sammy Davis Jr. spoke of singing Exodus in Israel. Alberta Hunter, the great empress of the blues in the 1920s, in the jazz and early blues era, was known to sing I Love You Too Much in Yiddish, which was often heard from her counterpart. This voluptuous gal right here, you know this face? Sophie Tucker, Sophia Kalish. And so there was a lot of reciprocity happening. Ethel Waters singing the great Jewish song Eli, Eli. Billie Holiday singing My Yiddish at Mama. George Gershwin writing the first black folk opera with Porky and Bess. Dorothy Fields, she was the gal, the daughter of Lou Fields, a great comedian of the day. She wrote Grab Your Coat and Get Your Hat, Leave Your Worries on the Doorstep. Just direct your feet into the sunny side of the street. And Dorothy Fields and Harold Arlen also spent a lot of time writing for black artists at the Cotton Club. So there's this sort of reciprocity that's happening. And musicians were the trailblazers. Long before the 1960s civil rights era even came along, there was kindred spirits happening. And this was a time, as I mentioned earlier, when blacks and Jews found each other. We can also talk about two East Coast Jewish kids, Jerry Lieber and Michael Stoller, who claimed they didn't write no song for whites. Early on in their career, they were quoted as saying, they didn't write no song for whites. We can talk about suburban Jewish kids like Michael Bloomfield, who had a fascination with the Chicago blues and was so fiercely determined to learn that he often found himself in some of the roughest clubs on Chicago's south side. It wouldn't be long before he would be highly revered himself. So these were the trailblazers, and they helped to blur the color line or simply break down old stigmas. There's guys like Mickey Raphael, who to this day, since the 1970s, has been touring with Willie Nelson. So when you hear that crying harmonica in Georgia that just takes your breath away, that's Mickey Raphael, a Jewish guy who's traveled extensively throughout the world and the Deep South. When asked what it was like being the only Yid on the bus, he put it this way. Well, besides manipulating the press and controlling world banking, I've got my hands full. This evening is about the very foundation upon which American popular music is built, and the innovators whose blood, sweat, and tears helped to create it. But the important question is, why the Jews? Why the Jews? We can think about this as we really begin to play some of this music tonight, and that's mostly what I want to do. But ask yourself that question, why the Jews? I'll give you some of my own opinion on this, with a little help from Rich Cohen, the author of The Record Man. One, because there was money in it. I'm talking about the Jewish entrepreneurs who had time for rude, crude, crass, had moxie, had chutzpah, and had a willingness to record artists who no one else was interested in at the time. Because there was money in it. Because no one could shut them out. Because there was chicks, and more chicks. You can't ever forget that whether you're talking about blues or rock and roll. Okay? That's really important. Because it was better than selling schmattes. You know this Yiddish word, schmatte? Schmatte is the rags, right? The rag man. It's better than selling schmattes. Because if you want something, build it. Build it. Because of the personal knowledge of persecution, there were possibly, the only Americans willing to form a partnership with poor blacks. And if you look at the history of labels like Chess Records, which was immortalized in the movie a few years back, Cadillac Records, you would know then that it was men like Leonard Chess Chess, who started out working at a liquor store on the rough and tumble south side, and then went on to open a club, the Macomba Lounge. It was guys like Hy Weiss, the founder of Bang Records, a tough runner out of Brooklyn, and I do mean tough. So you're going to hear these kind of things from these men in that generation. He was fun to have around because he'd say things like, how do you celebrate a record? How do you celebrate a record hit? How do you celebrate a hit? You go to the main schmuck. It wasn't always pretty to hear those kind of things, but these guys were rough tumblers too, and it took that to bridge that gap in that era. There was Jerry Wexler, co-owner of Atlantic Records, the only independent to outclass the Chess record label, with acts like Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin, Joe Turner, and Bobby Darin. Wexler once said this about his view on race. I understood prejudice. I had seen it my whole life, and I always thought I was on the right side. As a Jew, I didn't think I identified with the underclass. I was the underclass. There were men like Leonard Chess who borrowed money from his dad to open up the Macomba Lounge, as I mentioned earlier. They would go on to record all of these acts. Now, you may not know the name Chess Records, and you may not know the names Leonard or Phil Chess, but you will recognize these names because they are now regarded as icons in the canon of American popular music. Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Bo Diddley, Chuck Berry, Etta James, John Lee Hooker, Little Walter, Sonny Boy Williamson, Willie Dixon, Otis Spann, Coco Taylor, and many, many others. This is the foundation of rock and roll, my friends. My good friend Jim Liban is going to sing some wonderful classics tonight from the Chess era. And I'll bounce a few of my own Yiddish blues songs off of that as we go on. At one time, Chess Record employed 200 people. They beat everyone else, that is, a lot of the other independents. Why? This says a lot about that era and the drive and the determination. They grew up with the parents of pull yourself up by your bootstraps generation, the ones who weren't afraid of hard work. And what did that mean in terms of a record label, an independent record label? What that meant is that they found the talent, they cut the deals with the record stores, they understood the importance of the small town DJ long before payola, man. They produced the records, they promoted the records, and often from the trunk of his car, distributed the records, putting on 30,000 to 40,000 miles a year. Rich Cohn wrote in Mockers and Rockers. In a sense, the black artists and the white record men had been joined in a marriage, a wedding of outsiders. And though their needs overlapped, in the end, they were not the same. Willie Dixon said that despite Leonard and Phil's reputation for buying the successful artists, new Cadillacs, and not always giving them all of the royalties that they deserved, it was sometimes a situation fraught with trouble. But still, Willie Dixon, preeminent lyricist of the era, said, but still, it could not have happened any other way. It could not have happened any other way. The big record labels weren't interested in these kind of records. So a record that sold 40 or 50,000 copies was a reason to celebrate for guys like Phil and Leonard Chess. It might cost 10 grand to produce such a record, and it might bring in 50 grand. That was quite a success. Sometimes a record would sell 80 or 90,000 copies. And this was the reason why little guys like Chess were able to stay in business and not attract too much attention. In the end, Leonard and Phil, like their peers, were a harbinger, the first of a legion of white men to cross the racial divide in search of riches, adventure, and authenticity. These were men who a generation earlier might have run with the Jewish gangsters in Brownsville, and a generation later might have worked on Wall Street with the Harvey Weinstein types. Lastly, this evening is about how those of us who have been riding on the coattails of our ancestors have found our own sense of authenticity in this music and its history, and how we are taking it to new places. That's what this evening shall be about in our minds. Are you ready?
any given Sunday, there would be dozens of black blues players on the corners plying their trade, passing around cigar boxes for a little spare change. And I got to know Big Walter and would spend some time at his house, and he literally taught me this song in the living room of his house back in 1973. And I never knew, he always did it differently, but I'm going to do what I remember of it.
E, right? E, G. Huh? G? No, E. Okay.
And it didn't matter, sometimes he would do it in different keys too. Preach like Paul, Sunday comes, and that's all, So have a good time, have a good time, have a good time. I'm gonna have a good time, rock and roll all night long. We're gonna have a good time, rock and roll all night long. Rev. Like Paul, Sunday comes, and that's all. Have a good time. We're gonna have a good time. A rock and roll on the long. I said, I need your help. Have a good time. Have a good time. Have a good time. Have a good time. We're gonna have a good time. Rock and roll all night long. Rev's telling me that I'm too loud. So. If, if any of us are too loud, just
say
tell
oi.
Rev.
Say oi. All right. Well, speaking of oi, I think we're gonna do a little song called "The Peddler's Blues," and this is a composition that just kind of demonstrates how I took some of the blues motif and applied it to my experience and my heritage as an American Jew. And basically, what this touches on is the experience of coming to America with little or nothing, and trying to make something from nothing, and these stories that are not synonymous strictly with the Jewish people, but with Americans in general. And so many of us were peddlers when we arrived on Samuel Ellis Island, and some of us were entrepreneurs with that regard. We peddled everything from pots and pans to apples and bananas. And the great tome of immigrant history, I'll read a quote to you from Irving Howe, from The Land of Our Fathers. Anyone fascinated with immigrant history will know of this book. Said one peddler, "The next day I made up my mind to knock at every door. I went and I knocked, but many refused to answer the door, shouting that they did not need anything. Some did buy a couple of cents worth of goods, but with an air of one giving alms, as though to pity the poor immigrant. My face burned with shame, but I dragged myself along." So those of you who love your jobs, those of you who work 3-4 days a week, not entirely a 9 to 5, know that in fact we owe a debt of gratitude to those whom backs we have been riding on for so long, and those who paved the way. So this is a song that touches on that experience. And you guys get to help out. You'll come in and you'll sing these wonderful words. Oi, 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 oi. Can you do that? Oh, so enthusiastic today. Feel that. All right, don't forget your part. I'll take it off the turn. I'll take it off the turn. rocked a little close, but don't be fooled. The Jewish experience was full of them. And it was all akin to laughing just to keep from crying. I remember when I heard an early Liban record. There was a great singer who sang Good Night Irene and the Rock Island Line and Kisses Sweeter Than Wine. He said, you don't know my mind, oh, you don't know my mind, see me laughing, just keep on crying. And you get that laughing just to keep from crying? That was the same exact thing my grandmother said to me. When I said to her, how come your matzo ball soup tastes better than everybody else's? Back then I was just this big. And she put her arms around me and she said, Bubala, my matzo ball soup tastes so much better than everybody else's because I mixed the laughter with the tears. The laughter with the tears. And so I'm going to give you just a couple verses of what that might have sounded like back in the 1920s. Okay? It wasn't like this blues stuff you're hearing now, no siree. God, my head is killing me. Who's got the Tylenol? Excedrin would do. That would work as well. Oh, yeah. We're talking Kintil Camp, people. The average work day. Were you working in those sweatshops, man? Were you a seamstress? Were you a peddler out on the street 15, 16 hours a day? Then you could relate when you wound up at the Yiddish theater and you heard someone crying this song. Laughing just to keep from crying. Oi, mein Fissilett tut mir weh. Oi, mein Fissilett tut mir weh. Sing this little song. You've been walking around too long. Oi, mein Fissilett tut mir weh. What did I say? My feet are killing me. I got bunions and corns. Who's going to help me? And let me tell you, all that schmaltz wasn't helping either. All that chicken fat, you know? Eating all those grievance all the time, man. Not living my grievance alone, chicken fat, no siree. Didn't always have the money to get what I wanted, so of course I would be singing this verse right here. And this ain't nothing but blues, people. You understand? Oi, mein Typical tut mir weh. Oi, mein Typical tut mir weh. Oi, mein Typical, bei mir ist es ein Typical. Oi, mein Typical tut mir weh. What I just say? My belly is gurgling like a river. It was 11:30. I went out with Jim Liban to the little Mexican cantina too late at night. I shouldn't have ate that much food. When I got home, I didn't have any Maalox or any Tums or any of that stuff, and I was in big trouble. Oy, my typical took me away. And lastly, because this show will only go about 80 minutes, you won't have to worry about crying the blues with this last verse right here. Oy, man, sing this little song. You've been sitting down too long. The Yiddish.
Yeah, here's another one from the Chess catalog, and I might add that Rev has a brand new album coming out. He just finished it up, and he asked both Peter and I to play on it. And this is one of the songs that, well, this is the song, the only song that I played and sang on it.
I wish we would have done more. It turned out so well, if I'd have known.
But it's by Howlin' Wolf, also known, his real name was Chester Burnett, and he was a chess recording artist, made a lot of money for Phil and Leonard Chess. And I actually had a chance to do a number of shows with him over in the early 70s. He used to play at a place on the east side. It's called Shank Hall now. That used to be called Teddy's. I don't know if... Yeah, what am I saying? You all look old enough to remember that. You remember Teddy's, right? From the early 70s, on the corner of Farwell and Ogden. He had some of the best blues and jazz acts in the country come through there. And Howlin' Wolf was one of them.
Where we come to expect that kind of influence of everything and all kinds of different influences being thrown at us at once. But George Burns talked about being a little boy and singing out on the corner. So we just hung out on the corner there on the Lower East Side and called ourselves the Pee Wee Quartet. Every summer there would be a citywide contest and all the churches would get involved. Down the road from our house was a Presbyterian church. How it got there, I'll never know. It didn't do big business. That church didn't have anyone to represent them, so they asked us, the Pee Wee Quartet. And there we were, 4 Jewish boys representing the Presbyterian church. Well, we entered that contest with, well, what else could we do? But we started out with When Irish Eyes Are Smiling. We brought down the house and followed it with Mother McCree. And sure enough, we took first place. All of us got a little Ingersoll watch, and the church got its coveted purple velvet altar cloth that it so desired. I was so excited by the experience that I ran home and I told my mom, who was hanging clothes up on the roof. I said, Mom, I don't want to be a Jew anymore. If she looked surprised, she didn't show it. She kept on hanging clothes and she said, would you mind telling me why? Mama, I just want to watch. I've only been a Presbyterian for 1 day and I got to watch. She said, first, help me hang the clothes and then you can be a Presbyterian. So I continued to exude with enthusiasm as I helped my mom hang the wet clothes on the line there on the roof. And when we finished, I noticed that the water had run down my hand and stopped that little watch from working. So I went back to being a Jew again.
We're going to turn it over to Peter.
Is that true? Is that true? A true story?
Peter is a professor at Alverno, and he's got a book out called Milwaukee Garage Band History. It's on the back table. I'm going to turn it over to Peter to share a little bit of this history with you as well.
Thanks, Rev. Like Rev, I'm both a performer and a teacher about music and culture, and Jim's a teacher in his own way whenever we get to play with him. But what I want to share with you is we're bridging to rock and roll, or what was first called rock and roll, and I teach a rock history course, just like many of us have gotten more involved in that. Anybody remember when jazz history was a new hot topic in town? Well, now it's pretty established that we have rock history, but the great thing about that is you can understand things that are a lot deeper than the mainstream idea of what pop music is. And the main thing that I get 20-year-olds today to try to learn is that when it's called rock and roll, it was basically mostly African-American rhythm and blues, either straight blues or vocal doo-wop or a big band that was playing blues. That's what teenagers circa 1933 wanted to hear. They didn't want to hear more crooners, you know, like their parents did. They were really more soulful, more passionate, more unpredictable. And basically the story I want to share with you is kind of a mainstream story. Alan Freed, who was a DJ in Ohio, first in Akron, so he was really a nobody. He eventually fell in love as an amateur jazz trombonist with this black rhythm and blues that was really going strong in the early 50s. And he changed from playing more mainstream pop songs to playing this black rhythm and blues. And that's why in Cleveland, that's where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is, because on this Cleveland radio station, he helped all these kids who were already falling in love with this to hear all this real black rhythm and blues and doo-wop, vocal rhythm and blues, and sometimes Johnny Hooker, the real old blues. The thing that's amazing is this exhibit, and there's always a great man behind the famous guy. And the great man behind Alan Freed is a Jewish entrepreneur, record store owner in a sketchy neighborhood on the edge of the Black River named Leo Mintz. And if there wasn't a record store that was willing to order those 78s and 45s, teens would have had nowhere to go. Thank God they actually bought music back in that day. They just steal it all off the internet. So all these kids in Cleveland, very white bread kids, were going across town and going to Leo Mintz's record store, and at the same time, Alan Freed, who was Jewish and one parent was Baptist, so I haven't figured out yet, exactly what Alan Freed, who's passed away, would call his identity. I do know his son, Alan Freed Jr., and he was raised Jewish. So anyway, Alan Freed was the guy who gets all the credit for kind of popularizing rock and roll, but kind of the great man behind him was one of these typical entrepreneurs who was willing to be in the gritty neighborhood, willing to stock the music that other people, at least white people, didn't want to stock. And with Cleveland, this whole thing broke out, the kids liking this upbeat, bluesy music. Alan Freed started calling it rock and roll on his radio show. And so that he didn't really have to own up to the sort of the racial essence of most of what he liked. And he didn't like white covers. That's one credit I'll give him. And I learned this from Alan Freed, Jr., his son, is that he felt very strongly that the originators of blues and rhythm and blues need to first be appreciated because it sounds more real. It sounds better than most covers. So he was mostly playing the real thing. Teens, all kinds of middle-class kids were going out and buying it, but there was this guy named Leo Mintz that was there to provide the records, and that's really important. He also had dialogues with Alan Freed about what he should call it and what records are really hot with the teens, so it was a really great relationship. One of the songs we're going to do now is one of those crossover songs that the teens heard through Alan Freed, and it's a famous song, Shake, Rattle, and Roll. And so you probably, and I was a kid, I probably only heard Bill Haley and the Comets, you know, shake, rattle, and roll. But, you know, there was a more bluesy, like that, original to it, which was done by Big Joe Turner. I don't know if anyone ever heard him. He was a very great, kind of like R&B big band singer. He had much more dirty lyrics than what eventually wound up on Bill Haley's record. So he had an identical song. I don't know if it was a follow-up. Maybe Chip knows. It's called Flip, Flop, and Fly. You think it was a follow-up, or? I'm not sure. It's very, very similar. That's what pop artists, whether they're R&B or whatever, they all, if they hit with one, they do another that's similar. So you're going to hear that Flip, Flop, and Fly, with Jim's going to start, is going to roll very easily right into the famous Shake, Rattle, and Roll. No, I'm going to dare to sing a little bit amongst these great singers here, but I'm going to sing those uncensored lyrics, so hold this young guy's ears when I do.
Well, it's a family show.
No, I won't get too bad. It's all veiled, thinly veiled. Here's my mic, my little funky mic. Check 1, 2, that'll work. All right, Jim, you get to count off your big flip-flop and fly. I can, but I was doing more 12 bar, if that's all right. In the key of A, right?
This is a very foreign language.
And are you singing first?
I'm gonna come after you.
Okay.
So that I make a better impression. I'm not playing any harmonics. I can't do that.
Sitting on a hollow stump. I got so many women that don't know which way to jump. And then flip, flop, and fly. I don't care if I die. Flip, flop, and fly. I don't care if I die. Chicken and seafood store. Oh, well, it smells like fish, but I don't know for sure. And then flip, stop and fly. I don't care if I die. Flip, stop and fly. I don't care if I die. Oh, well, no, baby, don't never say goodbye.
That was very brave, Peter.
He was so inspired. Are you folks having a good time tonight? Well, when we look at the themes of the blues, they often run contrary, I feel, to what a good Jewish boy from the northwest side of Milwaukee should be singing about. There's naughty blues, and there's songs about bad love and love gone wrong. And I've always been a one-woman man, you know, and I've tried to live my life with a little bit of mitzvah here and there, and try to do the right thing as much as I can. But it sure is fun to sing about some of the naughty stuff too. You know, I've had to reconcile a lot of this stuff within myself because, you know, look, without getting too into it, as a Sagittarius, I have this drive for things to be as authentic as they possibly have to be, and that when I do something, it really has to be me. I have to feel like me. I can't pretend to be something that I'm not. And thus, so many of these songs have been born. These things I call Yiddish blues. As my way of sort of bridging the gap. But one thing that I realized is that, you know, Passover time, you know, B'rei Priya Gofen on the Sabbath, drinking the wine, and heck, even Purim, when we're encouraged to get drunk, it still rarely happens. And so I've come to this place where I have to agree with Milton Berle, who said quite eloquently, he said, look, Jews don't drink. It interferes with their suffering. most of the good blues songs are songs of, the party records. That's what the Chess Brothers were doing. They were creating party records for African Americans. Only later would the Eric Claptons and the Keith Richards of the world discover this music and realize that was everything to them. Everything to them. So I give to you now what the world has always longed for. An original Yiddish blues drinking song. You're probably wondering, Lil Rev, what is our part in this song? Thank you. I'm so glad you asked the question. Your part in this song is I'm going to holler out the word, she sure got shicker. Shicker in Yiddish means to get drunk. Okay? These are things that nice Jewish boys shouldn't be singing about. So, all the fine, outstanding people here tonight, please take that to heart. Okay? So, I'll say she sure got chicker. You guys will holler that right back at me. And we'll give to you a wonderful contribution to the canon of Jewish drinking songs. It's about time. Let's see. Now, how many of you understand a little bit of Yiddish? Okay? So in order to let me just clarify something here. When I was growing up, I spent oftentimes my weekends at my grandparents', at least every Sunday. It was an era when you always hung out with your family. And while times, it seems, have changed a little bit, I long for those days. And my grandparents spoke Yiddish when they didn't want me to know what they were saying. I realize this gets off the subject of Jews and blues. But it turns out that because they spoke Yiddish, when they didn't want me to know what they were saying, I learned the most colorful words in the language. Now, my Yiddish teacher, Paul Melrud, would say, Lil Rev, that's not the highbrow Yiddish I've been teaching you. But nevertheless, you'll hear words like gelt. Everyone knows what gelt means, right? What is it? Boobaloo. Ganef. Thief, right? Okay. A schnorr. Beggar. Okay. All right. Schlep. Take me somewhere, right? Okay. Mishigas. Crazy. So you can hear some of these words in this song, and I want you to know what they mean when they come around, okay? Because you may be singing this in the shower now. Okay? All right. 2, 3, 4.
Take my account, now you're on the run. Well, you sure got shicker. Sure got shicker. Sure got shicker. Sure got shicker. Well, you sure got shicker. Shicker as a gal could be. And I schlep you here, you know I schlep you there. You kvetch, 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 like you just don't care. You sure got shicker. Sure got shicker. Sure got shicker. Sure got shicker. Well, you sure got shicker. Shicker as a gal could be. I'll tell you something else now. Drank Moby David, Manischewitz too. Their clothes look like a schmante. What can I do? Sure got shicker. Sure got shicker. Sure got shicker. Sure got shicker. Well, you sure got shicker. Shicker as a gal could be. Come on, Jimmy Liban, get shicker on me. Get shicker now. Oh, come you in the door. You sure got sicker. Sure got sicker. Sure got sicker. Sure got sicker. Well, you sure got sicker. Sicker as a damn me all the time. Why can't you gas? Girl, you put me through. You don't stop all this gas. I tell you now the truth. Sure got sicker. Sure got sicker. Sure got sicker. Sure got sicker. Well, you sure got sicker.